All participants will receive a post-event survey to complete, and we will share the video link once available. I will now turn it over to Barbara Cottom, Head of Corporate Affairs and Corporate Responsibility at Citizens, to introduce our speakers in today's session.
Thank you, Felicia. We're pleased to be here with you today to kick off what is our second annual Financial Empowerment Series. Financial empowerment is critical for every person. I know that I need it. I think we all need financial education at some level. And Citizens is very committed to bringing financial empowerment throughout our communities in a number of ways. I'm sure you've seen some of the $1.5 million in financial empowerment program funding that we have given to a number of nonprofits, where our colleagues are there helping bring those programs to life. We're committed to educating not only community members, our partners, but our customers and our colleagues as well. And today we're so lucky to have some subject matter experts here at the bank who are willing to share their time and expertise to help all of us make informed financial decisions in our lives. So today's session, Retirement 101, is the first of three that we are offering to be held throughout April. Our other two sessions are Understanding Your Financial Aid Offer and Managing Debt. And following today, you'll receive a link to register for either or both of those programs. So we invite you to join us. Today, our two presenters are Brian Argiro and Josh Giuliano. Retirement 101, I hope we all can get something out of it today. I'm sure we will, either setting the stage for saving for retirement, finding the right plan for you, figuring out how it all adds up and what we can do to take charge of retirement planning. So I look forward to the advice, and I will turn it over to you, Brian, to kick it off.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Barbara. I have the distinct pleasure today of presenting today's presenter, which is Josh Giuliano. Josh Giuliano is a financial advisor here at Citizens, and he's not only a financial advisor here at Citizens, he's the top financial advisor and has been the #1 advisor for about a decade now. For anyone who says that Citizens is a relatively speaking small pond, Josh is ranked in the top 100 bank advisors within the country. Josh carries multiple designations around retirement planning, including the CFP, Certified Financial Planner, which is the marquee designation around retirement planning. So, Josh, I'm going to hand it over to you if you can take us through today's deck.
Thank you, Brian, and very excited to be here with everybody today. As part of Financial Literacy Month, we're going to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, Retirement 101. And it is never, the takeaway today should be that it's never too soon to start. And conversely, it's never too late to start either, for those of you that may be a little bit late to the game. So with that being said, retirement is different from what it used to be. It used to be where you work for the same company for 30 or 40 years. You get a gold watch from that company. You work from the time that you're 22 years old to the time that you're 65 years old. You get a pension, collect Social Security, and then you go off into the sunset. That is no longer the case, unfortunately, and it looks as if now the onus has been put back to us, the individual, to try and figure out, how do we save for our own retirement? How much is enough? When do we start? How do we manage it with student loans, with mortgages, with kids, with college costs, with everything that we have to do during today's busy environment? And it's complicated. And it's complicated, and it's a balancing act. So the thought process that we're trying to get across to everybody is whatever you can do is going to help. A little bit is better than nothing. Starting later in life rather than earlier is better than nothing at all. And again, anything you can do is better. So that being said, Felicia, can I ask you to advance the slide, please? Thank you. So when we look at savings rates, a lot of people will say, you know, Josh, when should I start? How much should I be putting away? What's enough money? And unfortunately, you know, some of these answers are going to be a little bit painful for some people. there's seemingly never enough. But Fidelity came out with a study, and they typically use the number of 60 to 75% of your pre-retirement income is likely about the income that you're going to need in retirement. And the problem is everybody's not the same. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. Do you help your children out with college into retirement? Do you still have a mortgage in retirement? Do you own one home in retirement? Do you own multiple homes in retirement? So having $300,000 in a retirement account might be fine for some people, and it might not be anywhere near enough for you. So again, if you go into that expectation, let's say for a moment you need 60% of your pre-retirement income. So if you were making $100,000 in retirement, you might need $60,000 a year to live on, and a portion of that might come from a pension and or Social Security. The majority of that may be forced to unfortunately come from your investment savings and bank savings to get you there. The other thing to think about is people say, all right, I'm now entering retirement, I've amassed this number, $300,000. How much can that provide for me in retirement? So in general, historically, we've talked about a 4% withdrawal rule. So if you've got $300,000, 4% of that's about $12,000 a year or $1,000 a month thereabouts. So you look at that and say, well, is that going to be enough for me? Will that $1,000 a month for my portfolio, coupled with Social Security and any pensions that I or my wife or rental income, will all those things may be enough for you? And the question is, it depends, again, on your lifestyle. So I would say the key would be to start with a financial plan at any stage, whether you go online and find some resources or you come to your local citizens and or your advisor and say, you know, what's the right track for me? When do I start? How much do I need to do? It should start with a plan for everybody. So in looking at these statistics, here you say 17% of Americans do not have any retirement savings. That is very, frankly, scary to me, and it's accurate. We run across it all the time. And 42% of young Americans, because it's hardest to save when you're younger, in balancing out all of those different things, young children and daycare expenses and student loans and saving for college for yourselves or your children and or saving for retirement. So if you look at this demographic, it says those people 18 to 29, there's 42% of that age group that have no savings whatsoever. There's, in the age group of 30 to 44, 26% of those people don't have any savings. Fast forward to people 60 years and older plus, 13% of people 60 years and older do not have any savings to this point, which means either they're never going to retire or they're going to be living on Social Security on its own. Then you flip over to the right-hand side of this chart and you say, well, what's kind of the average? And you look at the average for people under 35 years of age, the average is about $12,300. And if you look at the median and or average for those from 35 to 44, it's about $37,000 in savings. And over 55, it's about $120,000. So if we look at that 4% rule again on that $120,000, that's about $4,800 a year. And even that 4% rule has been challenged. People think it should be used at 3% or 3.5% with the low interest rate environment that we've been in for the last 10 years or so. So again, the sooner you can start, the better. The more you can have, theoretically, the better. So that's great. So if we've gotten one point across, it's try and save for retirement. So the next place is, how do I do it? What are the best vehicles to use? What are the vehicles to use? Well, the good news is there's lots of different vehicles out there. There's individual IRAs where you could do this on your own. You could work with a broker. You could work with some of your citizens people to come in, open up IRAs, Roth IRAs, rollover IRAs. There's employer-sponsored plans like 401ks, 403bs, tax-sheltered annuities, government 457, thrift savings plan. Most large corporations especially will have access to retirement plans. There are about 33% of the population that does not have access to a company-sponsored retirement plan, and that's where those IRAs and or Roth IRAs can come into play. If you're self-employed, there's also some great options for you, including SEPs or Simples or solo 401ks or solo Roth 401ks. A question that we get all the time is, what's the difference? I hear of all these things, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, Roth IRAs. What are the difference? So in general, a 401k or traditional IRA allow you to get a tax break on any money that you put in today. So if you were to make $100,000 and decide that you wanted to put in $5,000 in a traditional IRA and or a company-sponsored 403b or 401k, you're only taxed on, you get an immediate tax break today, and you're only taxed on $95,000. Conversely, if you decided to do a Roth IRA and or a Roth 401k contributions, your $100,000 that you make, that $5,000 would not be deductible today. It would get invested. And now fast forward to retirement, when you go to make withdrawals on your Roth, there are no tax ramifications on either your contributions or any gains that you can make on those accounts. Conversely, the IRA, where you got the tax break on the front end, it becomes fully taxable on the back end. Question I see in the chat function says, can you self-direct a Roth IRA? And that's one of the beauties about IRAs is once in an IRA, it's the most flexible type of an investment from an investment perspective. So inside of IRAs, you can buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. There's also special types of IRAs where you can buy real estate inside of IRAs. You can buy, Bitcoin, lots of different things. So there's 50,000 different things that you could likely buy inside of IRAs and or Roth IRAs when they are self-directed. You could buy CDs or have a savings account and be at that conservative end of the spectrum. But by far the most popular is the employer-sponsored retirement plan. So if you work for a for-profit company like a Citizens, we'll have access to a 401k. If you work in government, then the 401k equivalence is a 457 plan. And then in things like colleges and nonprofits, you may be seeing more 403b plans, but essentially they're all the same in that it allows you, while you're working, to take money out of your paycheck, put it into an investment account, and in many cases it offers your company the ability to offer a matching program. So often people will say to me, I have a 401k, Josh, how much should I be putting in my 401k? The rule of thumb in a perfect world is 10%. The more important thing is to find out what your company offers for a match and make sure that you are at least putting in what your company puts in for a match, and then gradually, as you can afford to, try and increase whatever that is. As an example, if your company offers a 4% match and you think you're making $100,000 a year of income, that's essentially $4,000 that your company is going to offer you every year if you put your own 4% in. So it's like free money on that first 4%. So we would highly encourage people to put in that 4%. Now, if you can afford to put more in, ideally you put more in. If you say, well, I'm going to start with 4% with a goal of 10%, then we would say every time you get a raise, use that as a triggering event to put more money into that plan. So if you get a 4% raise, maybe you put a 1% and increase your contributions. If you get an 8% raise, maybe you increase it by 1, 2, or 3%. Part of this also is often we get the question of where should I invest inside of my 401k? And we almost jokingly say, oh, it doesn't matter where you invest. And I do say that jokingly, meaning over the long run, stocks will make bonds, stocks will make money, bonds will make money, real estate will make money, large companies will make money, small stocks, mutual funds will make money. More importantly, the accurate answer is a diversified portfolio of a mix of U.S., non-U.S. stocks, bonds, mid-size, large companies. Often they have what they call target date funds inside of your 401k, where whatever the fund is, you match up the date. So when you're going to be 65, and these funds will automatically pick the mix of stock and bond mutual funds, and as you get older, they will get more and more conservative. So the other part of it is a 401k is not the only way to save. So you could have a 401k where you take advantage of your company's matching program, and then you could set up an IRA outside of that. And also you have to be cognizant of income limitations potentially on different IRAs and or Roth IRAs. But after consulting your accountant and looking at your taxes and say, can I do those things? So I may want to have an IRA for investment flexibility, as often there's more flexibility of investment choices inside of IRAs and Roth IRAs. You might also say, well, I might not have access to a 401k, but my partner or spouse does, so I want to make sure that we're putting more money in theirs to get the match on their 401k. Some people look at it and say, well, I'm going to aggressively pay down my mortgage so that when I get into retirement, I don't have a mortgage. Some people say, you know, investments are not for me. I like to have rental real estate, and I'm going to buy a house and have that income in retirement to have. All good choices. Again, we started off by saying it almost doesn't matter where you invest as long as you're putting away some money. Anything that you put away for retirement is going to be better. Another question we get often, people say, well, what's better for me? A traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, a traditional 401k, or Roth? And again, it depends on your situation, but in general, the younger you are, the more it makes sense to do a Roth. The lower your tax bracket that you're in, the more it makes sense to do a Roth because you're allowing more time. And again, the money is completely tax-free in retirement. I would also say if you are in a higher tax bracket or older than, let's say, age 40, there may be some merits for doing a Roth anyway, just to balance it out, to have a diversified portfolio. Imagine in retirement, if you could have money in a pre-tax where you have to pay taxes on it, but you also have money in a Roth where you don't pay taxes on it, none of us can predict what future tax rates are going to be. It would be nice to be diversified and have money in each of those buckets so that you can then take advantage if tax rates change and have flexibility of where you take your distributions from to live on in retirement. But as I said earlier, because 33% of private industry does not have access to company-sponsored retirement plans, you may be on your own to save for retirement. The good news is there are lots of different vehicles out there for which you can save. Another question we get all the time is to say, you know, if I have $100,000 in my 401k and I'm 40 years old right now, how long is it going to take for this portfolio to double, or how is it going to grow, or how does that work? So a real simple way of doing this math is what we call the rule of 72. It just gives you a rough idea. The next slide, we're going to go in more specifically. But as an example, you divide 72 by your expected interest rate or return on your portfolio, and that's the years that it takes to double. So if you are 40 years old, you had $100,000 in your 401k, and you are expecting to make a 6% rate of return, then you could expect your portfolio to double in 12 years. So 72 divided by a 6% rate of return. So 12 years for your 100,000 to become 200,000 outside of any additions that you're making to it. So if you were to make a 12% rate of return, 72 divided by 12 is 6 years to double. So that 40-year-old would be 46 when their 100,000 would go to $200,000. So obviously, the higher the rate of return, the shorter the time frame until your portfolio doubles. One joke that we say is we meet clients all the time that says, well, I just keep my money in my savings account for my retirement savings, and I'm 40 years old. Well, unfortunately, the national average for savings rates these days is about 0.01%. So imagine 72 divided by 0.01% means it's going to take 7,200 years for your portfolio to double. So clearly a savings account, though it has its values, is not the most ideal place for long-term potential for growth and or retirement savings. It's not the best long-term strategy. It's fine for emergency funds, but not for retirement savings. So here's a more specific where we talked about the rule of 72. This is the actual. You see there at 1%. The rule of 72 says it takes 72 years. The actuality of it is 69.3 years. You see that I use 12%, and it takes 6 years, as according to the rule of 72. It really takes about 6.12%. You see here that some averages, long-term averages. If you say, well, how do I know what my portfolio is going to earn? You see that long-term bonds average about 5% historically. A balanced retirement fund, mix of maybe 60% stocks and 40% bonds, would have about a 7% average rate of return. And the S&P 500, which is the 500 largest U.S.-based companies, would have about a 10% historic average rate of return. So another question that we get all the time is when can I collect Social Security? How does Social Security work? So in general, you can collect Social Security as early as age 62, as late as age 70, And the longer that you defer your Social Security, the higher the amount is going to be. So there's something called a full retirement age for those people. And you see here, for those people born before 1938, your full retirement age is 65. For those born between 43 and 54, your full retirement age is 66. And for those born after 1960, your full retirement age is 67. So many of us do not any longer get a Social Security statement because the government is looking to save some money. I would encourage you to go online to that ssa.gov website you see below, and you can sign in and register. Unfortunately, it's you have to put your Social Security number, but they will show you your earnings history and what your expected Social Security dollar amount's going to be in retirement, and they're going to give you three different numbers. They're going to give you what it is if you take it at 62, what it is at your full retirement age, and what Social Security amount's going to be at age 70. We sometimes get questions for people that say, does it make sense for me to defer beyond age 70? And the answer is absolutely not. Your Social Security does not increase anymore past age 70. It does increase 8% per year every year that you defer from your full retirement age until 70. So at age 67, let's say that you're getting $1,000 a month. If you wait a year, you're going to get about $1,080 a month. Wait 2 years, you're going to get about $1,160 a month. So there is some value to waiting. However, everybody's circumstances are independent to them, and it dictates what is most important to them. Because that's the second biggest question we get all the time is not only how much do I need to retire, it's when should I start collecting Social Security? The good news is we here at Citizens have some wonderful tools. People in your local branches have access to these tools and can help you to decide what is the best time with Social Security calculators. There's also resources out on the internet, as you might imagine, giving you break-evens and things like that. So again, we talked about some examples here to say if I were to start taking Social Security, let's say in this case your full retirement age was 66, conversely, if you took it 4 years earlier, you're going to get a significant decrease in the amount of monthly distributions that you're going to get guaranteed for life. Also understand that there are significant increases if you wait, but there's other ancillary things that may work, that may be a little bit different that you have to look into, meaning if you are a widow, if you were divorced, if your spouse or partner did not work and they're going to be reliant on your Social Security. These are all things that you have to take into consideration when making this decision. It's one of the most significant and important decisions that you're going to make in life with retirement. So again, we'd highly encourage you to sit down with somebody, whether it's somebody at Social Security or someone, an accountant, an advisor, someone at your local Citizens would be happy to help with these things as well. So a lot of questions that we get is, will Social Security be there? There are some levers that the Treasury has and the federal government has, and right now they're saying that in 2034 they're going to likely have to do some things to make sure that Social Security is going to be there for future generations. And some of these different options are, increasing the taxation rates, possibly waiting for people to start taking taking funds in the future. But again, what I would encourage people to do is not be solely reliant on Social Security and do all these things to empower yourself to say, regardless if Social Security is there, is not there, isn't as much as I expected, I need more than what the Social Security may be providing. This is why I have to start investing on my own. This is why I'm looking to increase my retirement savings through my 401k or IRAs. This is why I want to get my money in as soon as possible to allow that power of compounding to help and work in my favor. This is also why you want to really avoid trying to not take money out of your retirement plans unless it's a real dire emergency. I've heard cases where people will invade their 401k and take a loan out to take a vacation or to buy a new car. I would try and ask people to not do that unless it's a serious financial hardship, as that's going to have a profoundly negative impact on your retirement savings in your retirement plan. So again, the question is, how much do I think I'll need? Fidelity, again, has some different things here that says, you know, at age 30, you want to have 1 time your salary. By the time you're age 67, you want to have 10 times the amount of what your starting salary was saved. So if you had started off in the workforce making $50,000 a year, at age 67, they're saying you should probably have about $500,000 in retirement savings. Again, if you look at some of those numbers that we talked about and said, I can't save 10% of my pay or 15%, it's just not feasible right now. Use triggering events like a raise to try and give yourself a 1% raise as frequently as possible. You see the chart in the bottom right here that says, if you can simply increase 1% per year, then your total contributions over your whole lifetime will likely increase by about $129,000. And your added balance at age 45, if you were to start this at age 22, would increase to about $191,000. If instead you said, well, I'm going to wait every 5 years instead of every 1 year, you do the same amount, meaning 5% over 5 years, but you wait till the end of 5 years to do it, the contributions aren't quite as high. They're still advantageous to not having done it. The sooner you can do it with any incremental amount is only going to help your situation. So again, if there's one underlying theme here, it's start as early as possible with anything that you can do. Ideally, if you have access to a company match, start with that amount. Any chance you get to increase that amount is always going to be better. Well, another way that you can increase, we talked about increasing through getting raises. Well, there's two sides to the equation. If you can increase your income and or decrease your expenses, both of those are going to give you extra cash flow. So one of the biggest, we always look at where your spending is in your budget and see if there's anywhere that you can cut out any extras. Well, we normally look at where's your biggest expense, and for most people, it's their mortgage. Interest rates are still historically low. What I would encourage people to do is say, would it make sense, or could we save money by refinancing our mortgage? That's often one of the big savers, and if you can, then what we would say is if in doing that you save $200 or $300 a month, well, then use some of that $200 or $300 a month to increase savings for retirement. By the way, Citizens can help with that. We look at your mortgage and we can help see if there's any way of refinancing to save you monthly amounts. The next biggest for lots of people is student loans and student lending. So to see if, again, take advantage of historically low interest rates, can you refinance your student loans, your children's student loans? Can that free up any money within your budget? And can we use that freed up money to increase savings for retirement? So obviously, if you can do that, and I would go right down the list and say, what's our biggest expense, and work your way down to the next biggest and next biggest and next biggest. And you've heard examples of, well, if I can just cut out Starbucks one day a week or every day, or make my coffee at home, that might make me an extra $20 a week, which actually adds up to about $1,000 a year, and all of those things can help. There's lots of different programs out there where they round the purchases off and they put it into savings account, cash back on credit cards and things like that. All of those things can be extra cash that you can use to make IRA contributions, savings. This time of year, tax returns, very popular. So a tax return this time of year talks about if I get back money every time of year, and if I simply just put that into my account and take a vacation with it, that's all well and good. However, the average tax return right now is about $2,767. And if you, instead of spending that on a vacation, were to either put that into your 401k, and if you did that starting at age 25 at a 7% interest rate, that would equate to about $600,000 by age 65. And that's above and beyond everything else that you're doing. So that's a timely idea these days. You could also look at, if you're getting money back, you could simply adjust your W-4 to change your tax withholdings. And again, that may then allow you to put more into your paycheck and more into your 401k because of it. Another thing that you can do is you can shop around with your insurance. You can first see if there's more competitive interest and or increase your deductibles. On average, increasing your deductibles can decrease your premium by somewhere between 15 and 40%, which might save you about 25, 40%, taking that money then and using that money to contribute somewhere else into some sort of a retirement vehicle, again, is always going to help. So here we see a chart of what it actually costs, what it's actually going into the plan, and this is just your contributions, not taking into consideration any monthly matches that your company's giving. So if we look at the $50,000 level, the third row down, and we say, I want to put in 3% of my pay, that's a monthly contribution of $124, but if it's done in a pre-tax version, it's only costing me $92 because of the tax savings on the net pay. And if you look at the year end, that's $1,488 that's going into your retirement plan before any investments or any investment return. Now imagine if your company also gives you a 3% match on that, now that's doubling to almost $3,000 a year. So again, you see that at 3%, it's $124. At 4%, it jumps to $166. And ideally, the more that you can put in, you see what that does on an annual contribution. And over a lifetime, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, that's going to be a significantly larger amount for your nest egg. It's speculated that Albert Einstein said after his theory of relativity that the power of compounding of interest is the most powerful force in the universe. And we talked about that with the rule of 72. We have many clients that after years and years of savings, that they find that their portfolio and the interest that it's accumulating often is making more money for them than they ever made while they were actually working. So what a wonderful place is if in retirement your portfolio can be generating large amounts of interest income to ideally provide for you on its own, and maybe in some cases there may be a surplus that we can talk about gifting or helping the next generation out if that's something that's important to you. So again, we talked about starting early and the importance of starting early. So here we talked about making IRA contributions annually and what that looks like at a 7% rate of return. So we put here when the IRA contribution limits were $5,500 a year. What would happen if you started at age 22? What would that portfolio look at age 65 versus if you waited till 30, waited till 40, or waited till 50 in that case? And in this case, you see that if you started at age 22 years old, making an IRA contribution and maxing that out every year, up until 65, your portfolio would grow to almost $1.6 million. If you simply wait 8 years longer, you see the portfolio is almost half at about $906,000. If you wait till you're 40 years old, it goes down to about 25%, about $434,000. And if you wait till you're 50 years old and simply do the same contribution limit, the IRA, $5,500 a year, which used to be the maximum, it's $193,000 a year. So again, starting early with that power of compounding interest can be significant over a lifetime. Well, if you look at this and you say, well, I didn't get started as early as I would have liked to, but it's really important to me, and I'd love to hit that magic number of $1 million. How do I do that? Well, if you're fortunate enough at age 20 to have a phenomenally paying job and you are in a position to be able to save $292 a month, that's about what it would take starting at age 20 to have that magic number of $1 million under an average market return or a 7% market return. If you wait till you're 25 years of age, you see that you now have to save $418 a month. Fast forward to 30 years old, you'd have to save $603 a month to get you to that magic $1 million. Again, this is all on your own, not taking into consideration any company match that's in there. If your company offers a match that's equal to yours, you can cut these numbers in half. 40 years old, you see, you now have to put away $1,318. Compare that to your age 20. You see that it's 4 times more, over 4 times more that you'd have to start putting away on a monthly basis. So again, anything that you can do is at an earlier age is only going to help that situation. So how do you get started? I would say the ideal is talk to an advisor, go to your local Citizens. We have lots of bankers that have been well trained in helping you to do a retirement checkup, which is our financial planning software that they can help with. We have 400 advisors here. We have a financial planning team of 50 specialists that are here for you. And some of the questions that you're going to want to ask are, how much money do I need to retire based on the lifestyle that I would like? When should I claim Social Security? What are healthcare costs look like in retirement? When can I retire? What are some of the advantages and or disadvantages of retiring earlier than maybe later? If I work part-time in retirement, does that help my situation? How do I retire? Meaning, what happens? What are the steps necessary? How do I turn on Social Security? How do I turn on my Medicare? How does Medicare work? Understand that your resources here at Citizens are completely complimentary. We don't charge for any of these things. We are in the business of giving advice. There are lots of different resources on the internet. We would completely encourage you to do as much reading and studying and educating of yourselves as you can. There's lots of different resources out there, and we'd be happy to help with any of those questions either now or in person. So with that being said, I'm going to ask for those people that haven't already asked questions via the chat feature, if we haven't covered any of your questions, to by all means ask those questions, and let me ask Brian some of the questions that we may have in the chat function.
Yeah, absolutely. So fantastic job, Josh. And we do have a couple of questions in the queue. So the first one is, do we have a template that we can use for financial planning? I know you touched upon this a little bit. What would you encourage someone looking to go through a financial planning process? What would you encourage them to do?
So there's lots of different financial plans. In our own financial planner, our bankers all have access to financial planning software, and there's some software out there. And we have about 8 or so different versions, depending on the complexity of your own situation. And then there's the internet, too, that has some basic 401k calculations. Often part of your 401k will talk about calculators and retirement calculators. So any of those things are better than none of those things. The closer you are to retirement, the more important it is for you to get a more detailed financial plan so that you can make sure that you are on track to retire at the time that you want, in a lifestyle that you're looking to, and also decrease the risk of maybe potentially your portfolio leading into retirement.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We have a question from Crystal. What are the best investments in a thrift savings plan?
That's a great question. So I guess the first disclosure is it depends on you and your risk tolerance. Obviously, the younger that you are, the more risk that you can take on if that fits in. But often there's some questionnaires that your thrift savings plan should allow. There's usually what they call a risk tolerance questionnaire, where you answer some questions and you might show that you're comfortable with risk. And then I would say that you want to be cognizant of fees within the funds that you're charged. Typically, thrift savings plans are fairly reasonable in terms of their fees. And I would say if you have the knowledge, the inclination, the desire to follow the portfolios and design your own portfolios, then you want a mix of large company, mid-sized companies, small companies, stocks, bonds, U.S. and non-U.S. If you say this is not my area of expertise, then there should be some funds that either will be risk-based, meaning they'll call it a conservative portfolio, a moderate or an aggressive, or as we said, the target date funds that might say retirement 2020, 2030, 2040. You match that date up when you're 65 years old, and that way that will be risk appropriate for someone your age. Excellent.
So the next question comes from Mary. IRA limits and 401k limits are independent, correct?
So that is true. So IRA limits this year, they just increased them. They are $6,000 for both traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. And if you're over the age of 50, you can contribute an additional $1,000 to mean $7,000 as what they call a catch-up. Your 401k, 403b, thrift savings plan, tax sheltered annuity is $20,500 is the contribution limit. And if you're over 50, another $6,500, so the grand total of $27,000. So those are independent. if your income allows it, you could very well make 401k contributions to the maximum, and then you could make IRA contributions to the maximum as well. Again, I'd suggest you talk to your accountant in terms of IRA and Roth IRA contributions for income limitations, because there are some income limitations. There are, however, no income limitations on 401ks or Roth 401ks, and we get that question quite often.
Okay, and the next question comes from Christine. If you work part-time after retirement, can you still contribute to an IRA regardless of your age?
So great question. That has recently changed. It used to be that once you turn 72, you can no longer make IRA contributions. You now can. You can make them up to your earned income and or the contribution limit, whichever hits first. Meaning, let's say that you are part-time and you make $5,000. Well, then you can only contribute $5,000. Let's say that you're part-time and you earn $20,000. Well, then the IRS limit of the $6,000 or $7,000, depending on your age, would come in before the $20,000 would, and you'd be limited by the IRA contribution limits.
Excellent. And the next question is a follow-up to the IRA contributions. What is the max IRA contribution? Is it per person or per couple?
It is per person. Again, you have to look at income limitations, and the income limitations will be per couple, and there's what they call phase-outs. So if you work for a company, like I work for Citizens, and I am married, there are income limitations to IRAs, Roth IRAs. You can, however, make a non-deductible IRA contributions if you're a high income earner. If you are very interested in this, again, come to your local Citizens. We can help with that. Or when you're seeing your accountant this time of year, you can say, hi, Mr. or Mrs. Accountant, I am interested in making an IRA contribution, a Roth IRA contribution. Am I eligible? And they're often this time of year getting lots and lots of those questions, and this is the most popular time for IRA contributions based on that, because you can make an IRA contribution for the prior year up until April 15th and or when you file your taxes, whichever comes first.
Excellent. That's the last question that we had in the chat feature. So I would encourage, if anyone else has any questions on their mind, please share those in the chat feature. We'd be happy to cover those.
So I would encourage, thank you, Brian, everybody to look up here. We've got Citizens Financial Empowerment Hub. There's some great resources on there, many of the things that we covered today and some of the things that we didn't cover on there. Citizens has really been focusing on retirement and tools of things that we can offer to our customers and our community. So with that, we're very pleased about our session today. We hope that you join us for future sessions, and by all means, stop into your local Citizens and ask if they're able to help on any of these different fronts or any of these things that we may or may not have covered today.
And Josh, just one last question that just came into the chat feature. If you reach the 401k limit of $20,500, can you still contribute an additional $20,500 to the Roth 401k?
You cannot. The $20,500, assuming you're under 50, or $27,000 if you're over 50, is a cumulative 401k contribution. So if you do a mix of pre-tax and Roth, the combination of those two cannot exceed the IRS limitations.
Excellent. And a question from Allison, great question here. Is it more financially beneficial to save for your children's education or save for retirement if you had to choose?
It's a great question. I am often a believer to say you can borrow for paying for college. You cannot borrow for your retirement. In many of your retirement vehicles, there are ways to access those so that if you were in a wonderful position to say, you know, I've got too much saved for retirement, not enough for college, you can always borrow against some of your retirement accounts. Roth IRAs have ways of taking back your original contributions without penalties. There's lots of different ways of accessing your retirement funds to help pay for college, but not the other way around. So given the choice of the two, I would say retirement first, college second. In an ideal world, we try and do a little bit of both.
And we have another question, and this is going to pertain to the CARES Act that was enacted a couple of years back. Do you still have to take the RMD, which is the required minimum distribution, starting at a certain age, or has that changed?
So the answer is yes and yes. So you do still have to at a certain age, and the certain age has changed. So the certain age used to be the April 1st after your 70 and a half birthday, and now it is at age 72. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, that if you are still working and have a company-sponsored retirement plan, you do not have to take your required minimum distributions from that company-sponsored retirement plan if you are still working beyond the age of 72 these days. So as an example, if you're 74 years old, and let's say that you work at CVS, and you have money in the CVS 401k plan, but let's also say you have an IRA. You would have to take the money from the required minimum distribution from your IRA, but not from your CVS 401k at that point in time. Now, let's say that you retired all of a sudden and you left the money in your CVS 401k, but the moment that you're no longer retired, you now have to start taking money from that company-sponsored CVS, in this case, 401k plan, because you are no longer actively employed with them. So just because it stays in the company's 401k does not preclude you at age 72 or later from having to take that required minimum distribution unless you are still actively working.
Excellent. A few more questions for us. Allison has a follow-up question to the retirement savings versus the children's education. Can we use retirement savings to help pay for children's education?
Short answer is yes. Most 401ks have a loan provision. IRAs have a withdrawal provision where you can avoid a 10% penalty if used for college. Roth IRAs, so long as you've held them, and there's some little stars that I'm going to put next to these that say there are some other rules that may be involved that you have to check with your professional. But Roth IRAs, so long as you've held them for 5 years, you can take back your contributions without a penalty. So let's say that you're 50 years old, you've been contributing to your Roth for the last 20 years, and you've put in $150,000 of contributions, and it's grown. You can take back a portion of those contributions without a penalty to use for whatever you'd like, college or anything for that matter. So there are some ways, and some are better than others naturally.
Excellent. We have a Roth conversion question. Is there an optimal way to making a mega Roth conversion from a 401k that doesn't create a massive tax implication for the year of conversion?
Great question. What I would say, and we have been doing this for lots of clients lately, is there are certain places within the tax bracket, i.e. if you're married filing jointly and you make, let's say, less than $110,000, there might be some room to stay in that 12% tax bracket. So what we've been looking for clients is to say, where's the sweet spot in the tax code and how much room do you have that you could convert a portion of that and not get hit with a significant tax bill. There's no way of doing it without getting any tax bill, but there may be ways of doing it with a smaller tax bill. So let's say for a moment that you're married filing jointly, but only one of you is working, you make $50,000 a year, you've got a large pre-tax or 401k, and you want to put some in a Roth. According to the tax code, you can convert about $60,000 and stay in that 12% bracket, and that's a fairly cost-effective way of doing it. So we have some clients that every year we look at where they are in their tax bracket, we get their accountants involved, and we make a partial conversion in a tax-efficient manner to do those mega conversions, backdoor conversions, or just traditional Roth conversions.
Next. So the next question is, when do you start drawing down from your IRA, and when do you pay taxes?
So the question of draw down from IRAs and or retirement accounts depends on your situation. So ideally you don't draw down until you need it, and ideally you don't need it until you're retired. Ideally you're not retired until you're 59 and a half. If you're 59 and a half, there's no longer a 10% penalty. I'll put a star next to that because there are ways of accessing your IRA as soon as 55 without a penalty. But let's just say for a moment you're the stereotypical work till you're 65, you retire at 65, you don't have an earned income anymore, and you're going to need your portfolio to start generating that income replacement for you, and you start pulling money from your IRA. You can start doing it monthly, annually. There's lots of different ways to set it up logistically. And what you typically do is let's say you retired in January 1st of 2022. Let's say you're taking out $2,000 a month every month for 2022. We normally encourage our clients at the point they take money out to withhold the taxes so that there's no unpleasant surprises at the end of the year. And then what happens is you get a 1099 at the end of 2022 saying you took out $24,000 from your IRA, and let's say you withheld $3,000 or $4,000, And it's much like you did in your working years where you brought your W-2 to your tax person or you did it on your own and you said, I made an income, I withheld so much in taxes, they plug in lots of different factors and you either get money back or have to pay to kind of balance things out. It's the same in retirement where you get a 1099 instead of a W-2. That shows how much money you took out of your retirement or 401k or 403b, what the tax ramifications were. We always say be very cautious about taking money out of an IRA. And this goes back to an earlier point where it's nice to have money in an IRA and a Roth IRA before retirement, because any withdrawals out of your IRA in retirement or whenever for that matter, it's added to your taxable income in the year in which you pulled that money out. So let's just say for a moment that you took a large withdrawal out of your IRA while you were still working. And let's say you took out $50,000, that $50,000 would get added to whatever income you have and potentially bump you up a few brackets. So we think that it's very important to come up with a retirement income or a withdrawal strategy in retirement to keep yourself in the most tax efficient manner possible.
Excellent. And next question comes from Judith. If we are not local, who do we reach out for assistance?
So Judith, first off, lots of things these days are being done virtually. There's lots of local resources as well, but you can start with citizensbank.com. We're regional now up the East Coast. We've got locations lots of different places. And again, lots of these different things are virtually. I know for myself, I work with clients in 17 different states and 3 countries these days. So the world of technology has decreased making face-to-face necessary. But whatever makes you more comfortable, whether it's someone in your local community, an expert that might be a little bit further away, whatever it is, that's a good fit for you and makes you most comfortable. That's the most important thing.
Excellent. And I know you touched upon this earlier in the deck. We have a question from Carla. Is it better to do a 401k pre-tax or after tax?
Great question. I think the Roth after tax or Roth is probably the most important thing ever invented. I would say in general, if you're under 40, I think the Roth makes a lot more sense. And I think in general, if your income's below about $100,000, I think the Roth makes all the sense in the world. If you're over 40 and making over $100,000, I still think that there are some significant advantages to doing a Roth. The other part is you can split it. Most contributions within a 401k allow you, if you say I want to put in 10%, you could put 5% and 5%. You could put 8% and 2%. Most company matches, however, do go into the pre-tax option, but just understand that you can split it. In a perfect world, it would be wonderful if you could have money in each of those.
All right.
Well, with that being said, we'd like to thank everybody. We've got about 5 minutes left here. So again, thank you. Look forward to you attending. Hopefully you found some value in today's presentation, and we hope that you attend future sessions, and we'll look to be rolling more of those sessions out. And this presentation is going to be followed by a survey with also a link to the replay and the video. So with that being said, thank you very much for your participation today, and hope to see some of you all in the future. Thank you.